Bit Days is back, SuperTalk Mississippi. We've got Mike Chaney, the commissioner of the Mississippi Insurance Department, in the studio. Morning there, Commissioner. Thanks for coming in.
Good morning to you. So coming into work this morning, I saw 3 wrecks. The old Ramada Inn on I-20 at Ellis Avenue is still burning. And that's a toughie right there.
Wow.
And then get informed I've had 3 fire deaths over the weekend. So my day has started very, very rapidly.
So explain that. Your agency is responsible for investigating any fire deaths, right?
We are. Generally, we do not go into a city or a municipality unless we're asked to by the local government authority or the attorney general in the case of a suspicion.
Okay.
But we do a lot of work with all the sheriffs in the state and investigate suspicious fires. We had one on the Gulf Coast that killed a man, and a homeless guy was living in a trailer, and it burned up. We had a guy put a 120-volt heater socket into a 240 and burned up. Crystal Springs, just crazy stuff.
Wow.
So
I didn't even know that would fit.
I asked Ricky, I said, how in the world did the guy, Ricky Davis is the chief deputy, said, how did he get that in there? And he said, Commissioner, he had to turn it some cockeyed way to get the thing in there, but they did it. So
you'd think he would kind of know you're asking for trouble, though, if you start playing around with a plug to force it into a receptacle. Golly, I hate to hear that. All right. So that legislature's over there in session.
That they are.
They're over there making laws, trying to anyhow, and dropping all kinds of bills. What in particular is the Mississippi Insurance Department tracking?
Well, we're tracking a lot of bills. One of the bills that we've got a very keen interest in is a bill not to have to redo the Clarity Act, which costs us about $400,000 a year to do. We have to do that every 3 years, and it's got to repeal it. So we think it's going to die. We've got some legislation that affects a lot of volunteer firemen.
Okay.
And one piece of legislation that will come up in the House today is a bill to allow EMTs, paramedics, EMRs, to practice their profession without being on an ambulance. Today, if you're a paramedic and you're on a fire truck and you go out to save somebody, if you're not on an ambulance, you're not supposed to be able to save that person as a paramedic. That's a stupid law. And the Department of Health said they could not give us authority to let those EMRs, EMTs, and paramedics practice because the statute was silent. So we've trying to amend the statute. I've got all kind of groups meeting today to try to work this out because tomorrow's the deadline, and we got the code section open. We'll work through this. But, you've got 15,000 firemen in the state, Gerard, first responders. Can you imagine being told you're the first person on a wreck, and we got a Good Samaritan law in the state of Mississippi, that you can't save somebody's life? That is just not logical. So while we're trying to fix some problems that are real, we've got other problems that crop up. That's just one of the things that we've done. We've removed the limitation on the number of people that can be trained to be emergency medical responders at the Fire Academy from a cap of 120.
Okay.
We've got a great partnership with the community colleges and the University Medical Center where we train folks. We've just been certified last week to teach CPR as a certified place to go, which when you're working in partnership with the community college and the University Medical Center, things work. That's what government should be about, not growing, but cooperating.
Okay.
So we got a lot of other things. We got e-commerce bills. It keeps us in the 21st century and a couple of things along that. And then we always have the provincial problem of health care, and I have no answer for that one.
So one thing that kind of occurred to me with respect to health care, because we've got this lingering issue of whether or not the state should expand Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act as provided for by the Affordable Care Act. So Commissioner, I know you know it as well as anybody in the state, the American Rescue Plan changed the subsidy model and the eligibility model somewhat. And the way that structure works for 2021 and 2022. It's temporary. And one of those changes would allow a person with an income between 100% of the federal poverty level and 150% of the federal poverty level to receive subsidies in the exchange, in the so-called Obamacare exchange, such that their coverage costs them zero. It's a 2-year deal.
That's a 2-year deal, and right now that's not law, And I kind of doubt I was with.
It's not law, but it's for 2 years.
For 2 years, but it's not law yet.
It was in the Build Back Better plan to make it permanent. Yeah.
And I was at a Rotary Club last week where I introduced Senator Wicker. Yeah. That was before he came on Friday with Gallo and made those statements. But anyway, Roger told me that he did not think that the Build Back Better plan would pass because the Democrats are not willing to pare it down. Right. That doesn't have a lot to do with the passage of the bill. They want the whole enchilada, or the House is going to kill it. You know, people that way. Yep. So my prediction is we will not expand Medicaid in the state of Mississippi. Yeah. Now, I'm for some shape, form, or fashion to expand Medicaid if we can justify it financially. But I've looked at this thing every way you can look at it since Obamacare passed a decade ago. There's no way feasibly we could do this right now, not under the present circumstances. If we were going to expand Medicaid, we should have done it a long time ago. Yeah, way before I got on this watch. So that's a tough issue if you're in Mississippi. And you've got about 400,000 people that are eligible for Medicaid that are not on the Medicaid. They would be eligible. Let me re-say that. 400,000? 400,000 plus. It would be eligible for Medicaid under the new plan. They're not eligible today in the state of Mississippi because of our thresholds and the way we qualify people. A single person that's really sick and has zero, it's still tough to get them on. So if you're a female and you're pregnant, expecting a child, you count as two. Yep. It's pretty easy to get on Medicaid. Yeah, that's a covered group. A covered group. So you've got all kind of issues, and Drew Snyder operates the division of Medicaid. We have nothing to do with it, but we monitor it every day of the week simply because we have to know what's going on from the insurance side, health insurance. I was just curious, though, with respect to the number within that 400,000 that may qualify under this temporary change and have taken advantage of that. So it's about 200,000 would qualify. Okay. And when you look at the real numbers, you would probably expand Medicaid to the tune of maybe another 100 to 150,000 max. Right. Under the Build Back Better plan if it were to pass. Yeah. So the problem, Lee, that we have are working people are at a threshold where they make probably 150 to 200%, 50% of the poverty level, and they cannot afford health insurance. And my goodness, we've got some of the cheapest rates in the country. We're number 5 when you sit down and look at everything. But the problem is that people still can't afford it. And if you can't afford $1,000 or $2,000 a month of health insurance, I certainly understand that. I don't know what I'd do for private coverage, but Commissioner, under the subsidy model, a person making 150% of the federal poverty level, their premiums would be capped at 3.5% of their annual income. About 3% of that. Okay, 3%. So about $600 a year. $600 a year, and basically up to 138%, you pay zero, no matter who you are. Right. But the feds have not worked out the details on this. So let me caution your listeners. Yeah. I know we all got talking points that we look at, but when you talk to CMS and the people that we've been talking to, the same people for over a decade, so we pretty well know. They know what's going on. I know Randy Pate, the former commissioner for SSIO and CMS, former Alabama lawyer, good man, and they tell us the devil's in the details because we don't know how you would put somebody on an ACA plan, bypass Medicaid, yet you're expanding Medicaid at 0%, and who checks them to be certain? Some overlap there. Overlap. Yeah. So the real problem are the people that have a job, making a living, they're married and they have 2 children, whether it's a male or female, and they still can't afford health insurance unless they work for the state of Mississippi or a school teacher. Yeah. Yeah, I get it. I was just curious of that 400,000 that are thought to be eligible for Medicaid under expansion, how many of them are taking advantage of this temporary situation, which is actually a little better than Medicaid expansion because it goes up to 150% where you have zero premiums. Well, the number taking advantage of it are zero in the state of Mississippi because it's not law. Temporarily it is, though. No. We don't have to do it. We have to do something in the state. The state has to prove it. It's not a law. Okay, I don't get that. We'll talk about that when we come back. We got Commissioner Mike Chaney in the studio. Stay there. Got the Commissioner rocking and rolling here in the SuperTalk studios. Appreciate that, Rhino.
Commissioner Mike Chaney of the Mississippi Insurance Department is our guest. So we spoke over the break. We're on the same page. The big issue, of course, that the Commissioner and I discussed on the break was what's called the Medicaid Coverage Gap. And so Medicaid Expansion, just to be clear, really what it mainly does is it extends coverage to so-called able-bodied adults. It makes able-bodied adults is the way I think that it is termed, it is described. And that's a coverage group that is not eligible, I should say a group that's not eligible for coverage under present law. Expansion would allow able-bodied adults to apply for and receive Medicaid coverage. And it also would take care of that coverage gap, those with an income between that 45% of the federal poverty level to 100%, which I think in Mississippi is around $13,000 for an individual. So
for an individual, it's close to 13, 12,850.
Okay. So anyhow, we were just discussing that. I'm with you. I don't think that's got any legs in the state of Mississippi as far as getting Medicaid expansion done and enacted into law so that Mississippi becomes a participant in that. I don't think there's any appetite to do that.
But Gerard, to your question earlier before the break, how many people would be eligible or have gotten on to the ACA because of the new tax credits that have come out for 2 years? And we can quantify that about 16,000 people.
Well, who are the other 380,000? See, I can't figure that out.
We have no idea where they're going.
Well, put me down as one who questions that number. I mean, I don't know that they would be eligible. It might just be people that aren't covered and have chosen not to seek coverage and purchase coverage. Yeah. So
most of these numbers come from the Kaiser Family Foundation.
Very familiar
with them. So we question their numbers often ourselves.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyhow, all right. So. What else are you tracking down at the Capitol?
Well, we've got a lot of bills. One of the bills that we'll take up today is to increase the fire rebate money. One of the problems that I have as commissioner and as fire marshal is trying to keep funding for the rural fire truck program, which affects just about 60% of the population in the state on insurance rates and protecting their property. And as an example, this morning I saw a wreck. It just happened on the interstate at Bovina. Where a lady came off. She was going a little slow. Another Jeep clipped her, turned her over, and thank God the little old lady who's 70-something years old, according to Gerald Briggs, our fire coordinator over there, got up and walked around, said, God's with me, I'm alive.
Wow.
But traffic was tied up all the way back to the Flowers exit when I got through Flowers. It was that bad.
Golly.
And speaking of that, just another sidebar here.
Yeah.
Saw one highway patrolman writing a ticket for a truck just 1 mile from the Flowers exit, and Jerry told me at 20 minutes after the accident they still didn't have a highway patrolman there, and that's not because they don't care. We just don't have the force anymore.
Yeah.
That's an issue we really need to address in the state.
Yeah, it is, and we've had, of course, Commissioner Tyndall on the program talking about his efforts to recruit.
And he's a good man, too.
Absolutely, and to recruit more into the state troopers. They do a fine job, and we just, don't have enough of them.
So back to the fire rebate money.
Yeah.
It would give every county $30,000 from the get-go, and they could escrow that money to buy a truck so we didn't have to worry about funding down the road. And there's a reason for that and a lot of logic in what we're trying to do. We have a lot of poor counties in the state, and they can't get any money. They don't have big populations like Sharkey, Essequina, Jeff Davis. You just go down the list.
Yep.
And these guys, with the $30,000, we make them escrow it. We won't let them have the money until they get ready to buy a truck or whatever they got to do to keep the fire rates right and protect the citizens. So it levels the playing field so we're not faced with lawsuits and similar to what we had back in 95, 96 with the lawsuits against education.
Yeah. Well, we do have some counties like that get kind of left out because of their very small population. All right, so you are the fire marshal.
I am the fire marshal.
For the state of Mississippi. That is a responsibility of your agency. Tell us what's going on there with respect to becoming certified by the American Heart Association under various certifications.
Well, we teach. I'm also responsible for the State Fire Academy, and we teach CPR and resuscitation at the Fire Academy to first responders, EMRs, emergency medical responders, and even to paramedics in some cases. And we teach it to firefighters, including volunteer firefighters. There are supposedly 13,000 in the state. Mm-hmm. And this is big because very few people are ever certified by the American Heart Association to teach resuscitation and how to use what we call the shock pads and CPR and all the other things that go along with it. This is big for us.
So does that mean all firemen and women would go through this training?
Well, not if they want to, they can,
okay.
and that's up to the municipalities and the counties when they send them up to see if they want to be certified. We can do that.
Yeah.
Now the big deal is that the first people on a catastrophic event, whether it be a wreck, fire, or a hurricane or whatever, is usually a firefighter, first responders. Huh. And oftentimes they're looked at as second-class citizens by some folks in the state. And they don't really get it. These are the guys that go down when you have a Hurricane Katrina or Camille, and they're the first ones there. They do search and rescue, and they're the first ones there to try to save lives, along with the local areas. So we want them properly trained. That's your job.
Sure.
And we work very closely with all the municipalities and the Supervisors Association.
How are we doing with respect to outfitting the ranks with talent, with human resources as far as firemen and women are concerned?
It's tough to recruit people, especially as volunteers, because you're risking your life to go save someone you may not know or go out on the interstate and be left out there for 8 hours. We had a case, you asked me about bills earlier, we had a case where in Warren County last February, almost a year ago, our volunteers were out on the interstate for 8 hours working on a wreck due to icy conditions. Supervisor bought lunches, $64 worth. Auditor says, no, you can't do that. You got to pay it back. Because they're not employees, the county can't provide any type of benefit. So we've got a bill working its way through the process that will allow the counties to, within reason, provide meals when necessary for volunteers and do per diem. Some counties do $599 a year so they don't have to do a 1099. And we're trying to get some of these things legal so we can control it, and the auditor doesn't try to put us all in jail. And that's not knocking Shad, but that's just part of his job.
He's following the law.
He's following the law, and he said, fix it. So his guys came down, and we worked the language out, and that looks like that bill's going to pass. It will allow counties also to provide workers' comp for those volunteer firemen. But if you can imagine this, most volunteers are blue-collar people.
Sure.
They're not dressed up in white shirts with coat and towel. They're out blue-collar, and they're working, and they may be have a high-vac system or air conditioning, electrician, plumber, whatever, and they're called to a site. They leave their job at 10 o'clock in the morning to go see somebody. This morning, somebody left their job to go try to help this lady at 8 o'clock in the morning right in front of a school. So you see these things actually happening, and they get no remuneration. They don't get per diem for the mileage. And the
so it's truly volunteer.
It's volunteer, and the problem is we got fewer and fewer people volunteering, just like you have fewer and fewer people going to church, social clubs, etc.
Yeah, working.
That's a subject you and I can talk about forever about people quitting their job because they get government money. Somebody's got to pay for that.
I know. It's the Great Resignation, that is, as it is termed, is wreaking havoc really across the entire nation.
Now, Gerard, let me add this. This money that we're talking about on the rebate dollars that are going out, it does come out of the general fund, but you got to remember the purpose of tax on insurance policies, especially policies that cover fire and casualty on homes, was intended for fire protection. We collect $400 million a year in this state. We don't put anything into fire protection, less than $20 million out of the $400 million. So you've got to ask, what was the intent of the legislature 100 years ago, whenever they passed the law, and what's happening today, and where's that money going? At least you should use some of it for the intent of what it was passed for.
So presently, that is just transferred into the general fund?
Everything goes to the general fund, except the fees that we collect, and it's in the general fund because I'm not a special funds agency anymore.
Right.
So it's close to $40 million. You can look it all up on the tax schedule. And we got somewhere about $20 million. So and when I can get the legislature to fund the rural fire truck program, we got about $2.7 million. And in the last 10 years, it's been funded 6 times.
Wow.
No, I say that backwards. It's been funded 4 times over the last 10 years.
Wow. So we're in need of assets like that.
We're in need of assets. It's something we committed to do as a legislature. I was in there when we did it, and we're just not doing it.
Wow. Well, gosh, I guess
keep your promises is all we say.
Yeah, I mean, we've got this big surplus that we're all running around touting. Seems like that would be a potential use for it.
I don't know about that. They've cut my budget another 1%. So,
Commissioner, appreciate you coming in as always. Yes, sir. Always good to see you.
I appreciate people that know what they're talking about, Gerard, and you do.
I appreciate that, Commissioner. We'll be right back on Midday. Stay